Welcome to another AVID Chat. David Harpole and Jack Arnold. Jack, we're getting close to Christmas.
Yeah, getting there. I think this will probably end up coming out after Christmas. So Merry Christmas to everybody. Hope you had a good Christmas.
That's right. Happy belated everything. If you're joining us today, this is timely whether we get this to you here right at the end of the year or even the first part of the new year. But the title of today's is something along the lines of the value of having systems. And this is applicable in so many avenues of our life, whether it's personal, with your health, definitely financially. And it's having some sort of basics in place so that you can almost operate to some degree on autopilot with the things that are super important. And we'll talk about these, but they're not like big picture, life-changing type of things. It's almost like you got to know how to breathe before you can start the day type of thing.
Right. Yeah, I think it's, if in order to, all right, so a kind of a typical, I guess a normal thing is, most time when you get some kind of financial advice, you think, I need some investment help. Like, we've said so many times, like that's normally like you're into if we're doing 5 steps or 5 degrees, like, you're into the third, fourth, that's steps down the road. Really what you're trying to do is early on build up to those things. And the way that you build up to those things is you think about things a little bit and you put a little bit of effort into how do I want to design this part of the system. And then you just design a system so that as much as possible, it's automated so that you don't have to think about it. To your point about, breathing, you breathe and your lungs move automatically. You don't have to you don't take a lot of mental energy, creative thought into breathing every day. You still have control over it. You can breathe harder, I can take a deep breath and I can still have control over it. But for the most part, it's somewhat automated. If I had to think about every breath, I wouldn't have a whole lot of time to do much else. That's a system that works somewhat automatically. If you want to move up levels of abstraction and get to something where you can be a little bit, I guess you could call it more creative, more forward looking, you have to start taking care of some of those lower level things and try to make them as automated as possible. And the way that you do that is you build systems kind of with the end in mind. So I'm big on, building kind of a system as much as you can to automate as much as you can.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, I think, where a lot of the, I don't want to say roadblock, but there is definitely some sort of hindrance to growth with a lot of people. We've witnessed this multiple times in our careers. We've done this personally. This is a part of financial life planning as you grow from your own mistakes. But without the systems on the basic things, it's hard to have some sort of like aspirational thinking, because unfortunately the basic things do consume a lot of mental energy and time until they're automated. And a lot of times we've seen patterns, especially doing this for so long now with even clients that we've had for year after year after year, not a whole lot changes. Mentally, they may have some bigger aspirations or talk about different things, but they're still in the same, let's call it financial picture that they were 5 years ago. And ultimately, when you think about it, it's because those systems weren't in place for the most basic of basics, which we've said before starts with just knowing where your money's going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I think step number 1 is just having some kind of system in place to monitor your cash flow and where your money's going, and try to keep on top of it. That's not to say that these things don't take time to set up. They definitely take time to set up and get going, and you have to think about it and put some thought, and you don't want to just randomly throw something together. And it's not that you'll never update them either. Like, you're always going to be intervening and saying, this worked, this didn't work. You don't really know until you start building these things out. But once you get a system in place, it's really just some basic maintenance as time goes on to make sure that it's still working and you're checking in on it. Is this going how I thought it was going to go? We've talked before about having a cash flow system in place. Is, there's theory and practice. You say, this is what I want to have happen with my money. Right. And then you see what happens. Did that happen? Here's what I thought was going to happen. Here's what my expectation was. Is that really what happened? The only way you can do that is have some kind of system in place to monitor and to check in on that. But that's like the lowest level of base, the abstraction, whatever you want to say. Then you can start to build on top of that. And I like always talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but like those first two are just like food, safety, shelter, very basic things. If you want to get beyond those things and work your way up to the top, which is like the self-actualization, is those are basic things that you want to try to, as much as you can, make them automated so you're not worried about those anymore. I understand that it is, you're working up there. Some people are still in that. When you're first starting off, it's like, I just need to get through this month and make as much money as I can so I can pay my bills. I get that. But at some point, that becomes less of a concern, where I have plenty of money. I make plenty. I'm not so worried about not having food to eat and worrying about basic bills. Now I'm up to these higher levels where there's no real roadmap, and it's not so urgent and immediate. So if I can build a system to take care of those things are taken care of, then I'll know here's the flexibility I have to work on these other things. And those higher levels do take more thought and abstraction, but you can still build systems in place on how to make the most of that kind of stuff. That, like I just say, you go from having enough to making the most, and there's a little bit of a switch. And the way that you do that is to have some kind of build systems as you work your way up.
Right. And then I think we've seen this and found this when you have those systems in place, and you do have an idea of where things are going, and am I spending things that give me the most joy, or spending it on things that give me the most quality of life, fulfill me the most based on my values, and you have a quantitative understanding of it. I have X amount of dollars to now apply to growing, fulfilling my life even further. What do I do with it? It just makes it easier to let your mind kind of go free with it. Because if you don't have any idea, maybe you're a professional and you're working, but I don't know, you've reached the top, you've thought about being your own business owner, something like that. This is applicable. Without some sort of financial awareness of where things are today and where you want to be, how could you possibly assess whether it would make sense or doable to get out of, let's call it, the corporate world and kind of do your own thing? It'd be, I'd say, almost impossible.
It's just having those systems in place and having some basic things in place, and really does give you the freedom to think more about, what could I do? It gives you the space for creative freedom. I think we've talked about this in other videos too, is, giving yourself some constraints to actually allow yourself to be more creative. I think I use basketball, or you can use any game. They have some basic rules, and there's lines on the court, and here's some basic rules. But man, outside of that, have fun. Make the most of it. I think basketball is a good sport to use, but football is too. There's so many sports that every year people are more creative, and you see I can't believe the things people are doing with, say, football, which has some pretty basic rules, and just the amount of innovation around offense and defense and these kinds of things. But that's because there's basic rules in place, and you're free to do anything outside of that. So you can apply that same thought process to your own situation, is give myself some constraints, build some systems up, and then let my creativity run wild. Let me use my mind's creativity to my advantage, and not think about all these little things that I could automate that I don't have to worry about on a day-to-day basis.
Right. No doubt. And I would say, biasedly, that this is where professionals can help you. Obviously, we're in the financial, planning arena, but we talk all the time about working out or go to a gym. At some point, you probably will get to a point where you say, okay, I'm doing great things. There has to be something else out there. There has to be a way to kind of elevate where I'm at today so that I am maximizing it. And I do think the aid of a professional, that they have knowledge, experience in the maybe in the industry or whatever it might be, to help you continue to think bigger and larger, and then ultimately help you actually implement some of these things. Taking action is a whole nother talk. We've done those before too, that let's start thinking, and then when we have an idea, a framework where we want to go, now how do we get there? And let's boil that back down to, here are the first 2, 3, 5 steps that I need to get going in order to even make progress.
Exactly. Hey, this is what I want to do. Here's my aspirations and things that are important to me. And this is like way off, but I think that this is something I want to do. How do I get there? Like, what is the first step? And, a little bit of encouragement and, somebody kind of pushing you along, and also having the knowledge to say, here's some things you can use to your advantage. I've said many times, I have tons of tactics and tools to use. Not everything works for everybody, and it's hard to give generalized use these tactics because it's just different for everybody, and it interacts with your situation in a different way than it does the next person. But if you can at least, again, have some systems in place that take care of and as you build more systems, then you can say, all right, what's the next step? What's the next step? That you're not trying to get to step 10 from step 1 and jump over everything. You're gradually going to be making progress towards these. I would sometimes say things that you never thought you could probably do, or you thought were like hot pie in the sky. Like, you can work towards those things for sure.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point about the time aspect of it. That it also is the difficult thing, is that there aren't a lot of times immediate results. We just did one on feedback and the importance of getting feedback along the way. Some of these things might take 1, 2, 3, 5 years of working towards being in a position to really have even the ability to say, okay, I actually could do this now. It's taken me years of work and effort and energy, but if you don't start with those systems, what we've seen is that you just get 5 years happens, you're like, yeah, I wish I should have.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, you know what, when I do this, then I'll start. And 5 years turns into 6, and 6 into 8, and 8 into 12. And next thing you know, you're like, good Lord,
right.
Where's time gone?
Yeah, that 5 years, whatever, 10 years, it's going to pass whether you start making progress towards what you're trying to do or not. It's going to pass. Like, you can't stop it. So making little steps towards things over time, and I'm just amazed all the time how much faster it seems to go by. It's incredible how much just little things over time start to add up. And sometimes even if you just look back, you think, good grief, it's crazy how far I've come. I just worked my way to this. It's not like I have to put 5 years of effort into 6 months. I just need to take some time over the next years or whatever it takes to get to where I want to go. And to beat it home, I need to have some systems in place to do that. I need to have some kind of pre-commitment. I need to do this on a regular basis. Like, just waking up every day and thinking, well, what today is just, in my experience, not going to work. Like, having some kind of plan is great.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Well, if you have more questions or thoughts, we have tons of, as Jack mentioned, tactics to help with these things. We also have a process that helps guide you to the vision of your ideal life and to giving you concrete action steps to actually achieve it. Reach out to us. We can tell you more about that. Like our videos here, add a comment. As we always say, the more feedback we get, the better we can tune these to things that are important to you so we can all grow together. So,
Exactly.
good chat, Jack.